Right now, somewhere in the world, a baby is laughing for the first time. That baby will never remember it. Neither will you remember yours. Somewhere in your first years of life, you learned to walk, to speak, to recognize the face of the person who loved you most, and you experienced more raw discovery in a single afternoon than you will now feel in an entire year. And yet, when you reach back for it, there is nothing there. A blank. A locked door with no handle? You think you forgot. But the real answer is far stranger. You didn't lose those memories. Your brain was never built to keep them in the first place. And the reason why reaches deep into how you became you. Try it now. Reach back as far as you can. Find the earliest moment you can honestly say you remember. Most people land somewhere around age 3. A few reach 2. Almost no one goes earlier. Whatever you found, it sits behind a wall, and everything before it is gone. Scientists have a name for that wall. They call it infantile amnesia. The strange part is not that you forgot a few things. The strange part is the scale of what vanished. For the first 1,000 days of your life, you were a learning machine running at a speed you will never reach again. You absorbed an entire language without a single grammar lesson. You decoded faces, gravity, cause and effect, the difference between a smile and a frown. You felt joy and terror at full volume, and all of it was wiped clean. Why would the brain erase its most important years? The man who first asked that question was Sigmund Freud, more than a century ago. He noticed that his patients could almost never recall anything before the age of 3 or 4, and he gave the gap its name. Freud believed the memories were hidden, buried by the mind on purpose, repressed because they were too charged to face. He was wrong about the mechanism, but he was right that something systematic was happening. This was not random forgetting. This was a pattern, the same in nearly every human being on Earth. So if the memories aren't repressed, where do they go? To answer that, you have to understand something uncomfortable. A memory is not a recording. There is no video file in your head, no shelf where the past sits waiting. A memory is a pattern of connections between brain cells, and that pattern has to be built, stored, and kept alive. If the structure that holds it changes too much, the memory simply cannot survive. It has nowhere to live. And in a baby's brain, everything is changing all the time. Deep inside your skull sits a small curved structure called the hippocampus. Think of it as the part of the brain that files experiences into long-term storage, the librarian that takes a moment and decides where it belongs. In an adult, that librarian is fast and organized. In an infant, the librarian is still being hired. The hippocampus is one of the last regions to mature, and in your first years, it was wildly unfinished, adding new cells at a furious pace. That growth sounds like a good thing. It isn't, not for memory. A researcher named Paul Franklin, working at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto, with the neuroscientist Sheena Jocelyn, set out to test a radical idea. What if the very thing that makes a baby's brain brilliant is the thing that erases its memories? The infant brain produces an enormous number of new neurons, a process called neurogenesis. Franklin suspected that every new cell pushing into the hippocampus disturbs the existing wiring, like new tenants constantly rearranging a building until the old rooms no longer exist. So his team ran an experiment with young mice whose brains follow the same rule. They taught the baby mice to remember a specific place. Then they watched the memories fade exactly as infantile amnesia predicts. But here is the twist. When they slowed down neurogenesis, the memories survived. And when they forced extra neurogenesis in adult mice, those adults started forgetting too, just like infants. Read that again. The forgetting wasn't damage, it was a feature. The same explosive brain growth that lets a baby learn the entire world is the very process that overwrites the record of learning it. You traded the memory of your first years for the ability to build the brain that's reading this sentence right now. It's a brutal bargain, and you made it without ever being asked. But neurogenesis is only half the story. There is a second reason the door stays locked, and it has to do with something you are using this very moment. A psychologist named Patricia Bauer at Emory University spent years studying how childhood memory actually forms and falls apart. She and others found that the memories we keep are usually the ones we can wrap in language and narrative. A memory you can tell as a story has handles. It can be rehearsed, repeated, shared, and stored. But a baby has no words. An infant experiences the world as pure sensation, color, and sound and feeling with no labels attached. And a feeling with no words is almost impossible to hold onto for years. This is why your earliest memories tend to appear right around the time your language exploded. A researcher named Carol Peterson at Memorial University in Canada tested thousands of children and found that the age of a person's first memory isn't fixed. It shifts. Children who talk earlier and tell richer stories tend to have earlier first memories. The memory and the words rise together because one needs the other to survive. So think about what your earliest memory really is. It is not the beginning of your life. It is the beginning of the part of your life you had language to keep. There's an even deeper layer here, and it changes how you should think about who you were as a baby. To remember your own past, you need a sense of self. You need to understand that there is a you that things are happening to, a continuous person who existed yesterday and will exist tomorrow. Psychologists call this autobiographical memory, memory organized around a self moving through time. And that self is not something you were born with. It is something you built. Somewhere around your second or third year, you crossed an invisible line. You began to understand that you were a person, separate, with a name, a story, a past. And it is almost no coincidence that this is exactly when your first lasting memories begin. You couldn't store the chapters of your life until you understood that you were the main character. Before that, things still happened to you. They simply happened to someone who didn't yet know they were someone. Now here's the part that should unsettle you a little. Just because you can't remember those years doesn't mean they left no mark. They left the deepest marks of all. The way you trust or flinch, the way you seek closeness or guard against it, the things that soothe you and the things that set your heart racing before you know why. Much of that was laid down in the years you cannot access. The psychologist Chi Wong, who studies how culture shapes our earliest memories, has shown that even what we consider memorable is taught to us before we can recall being taught. You are carrying those years everywhere, you just can't read them. So this is the strange truth of it. You did not forget your childhood. Your childhood is not missing. It is dissolved into the very structure of the person you became, written so deep it stopped being a memory and started being you. The reason you can't recall learning to love or speak or trust is that you didn't keep those moments as memories. You kept them as yourself. Think about what that means the next time you meet a baby. You are not looking at a blank slate waiting to begin. You are looking at someone living through the most important and most completely forgotten chapter any human ever writes. Every face that baby studies, every comfort, every small fear, is being quietly stitched into a person who will one day exist and never know this moment happened. Which brings us back to that laughing baby. That first laugh will be gone by morning, lost to a brain too busy growing to keep it. The baby will never recall the sound, or the light in the room, or the face that laughed back. And one day, grown, that same person will reach into their earliest years and find the same blank wall you just found in yours. But the laugh was not wasted because it was forgotten. It became part of someone. Right now, somewhere in the world, a baby is laughing for the first time, and that single bright moment will vanish completely. And that is exactly how it is supposed to work. Because the things that shape you most are never the things you remember, they are the things you became.